Hey everyone, today I'm joined by Michael Emmet. He used to be a very big drug smuggler back in his day. He worked for all kinds of different criminal organizations, and one that really stood out to me was the American Mafia, so we're going to touch on that. And also, we're going to talk about what it was like for him growing up as a criminal in London because it's a little bit different from the United States because we got different laws and stuff. But he eventually went to prison. He changed his life around. He found God, and he wrote a book about it. So it's a really good book. I'll put a link in the description for it. He's got a really good redemption story. So without further ado, let's get into Michael's story. How you doing, Michael?
I'm okay, Adrian. How are you?
Uh,
Nice to see you, brother. Nice
yeah,
to see
yeah, you too, man. Nice to finally meet you. I'm glad you can make it out and come on the show, man.
you. My pleasure.
And you got a really good story. So I kind of really just want to start, from the beginning. What was it like, growing up? Who was your father? What was he to you and your mom? Because you kind of had a rough time growing up a little bit.
Yeah, there was that. There was. I mean, look, my father was. Since I've known about change. Yeah, since I've known about change, as the years have unfolded, I've sort of understood more today than I did then. I was infatuated. I was sort of drawn into the situation with my dad. So my father was a career criminal. Yeah, that was his job, and he comes out of South London. He was very well known in the fraternities of, let's say, the English underworld, let's call it.
Okay.
Um, he was Irish descent. He was second generation here, so he had that Irish mentality. He was only a small guy, but he was a very tough man. Yeah, but also as I've got older, I've started to see that people wear a lot of masks in this world. We become sort of a role play of who we think we are, and I think the world's very corrupt. We just happen to be called criminals, but I think corruption is at all different levels of government, of all sorts of things that go on. It's just that we come under that criminal fraternity, and for us, especially with my father, he got brought up in the 50s and 60s and 70s with the London fraternity of the underworld, albeit they was after the war. They had no money. They was all street urchins, street kids, all starting to play snooker and box. And from their sort of poverty days, I suppose the most easiest thing to do was learn to steal. And my dad stole for his food at a very young age. And he grew up with this sort of way about him. The book I wrote is called Sins of Fathers. And in a biblical sense, the sins of the forefathers are what I sort of found out about as I sort of started to investigate who I really was and why did I do certain things. And I saw that I repeated a lot of my grandfather's behaviour and my dad's behaviour, and it wasn't taught. It was it was something that I was born with. Call it genetics, call it your DNA, whatever you want to call it. The Bible says about the sins of the forefathers. So I was this boy. There was some sexual abuse on me at a very young age, which sort of wasn't great. Yeah. So with the father I had, the sexual abuse, my mother was, and I don't want to exaggerate this, but my mother was the antidote for my father. Where he was a bit sort of off key in his ways. He was a very bright man. He was a very fit man. He was a good boxer. He was a good athlete. He run at high level. Back in the day, it was called the 440. Today, it's the 400 meters. And so he had all that going on from him. His father, who was extremely intelligent, and so was my father, so was my dad. His father had him set up to be a surveyor, an architect. Yeah, and he was at a college, but it was in him. Yeah, and by the time that he'd gone through his days at school and college, he found that his satisfaction wasn't really there, and his desire to earn money and be who he was on the streets of London became apparent. Yeah, he was a serial womanizer. He had 4 marriages. My mother was his second marriage. And so I got brought up by this man, and he used to pretend he wasn't a criminal. So he lived a double life in his head. He portrayed himself as an antique dealer. Yeah. So we always live with a lie. Yeah. And it's funny, children adapt. But he gave us a great childhood. I mean, me and my sister and my brother, we were taken out to Surrey. We went to nice schools. I didn't get it. I just didn't get it. I couldn't focus. I couldn't concentrate. Again, I excelled at sport. By the time I was 14, I definitely started having mental health issues. I started smoking cigarettes. I went on to cannabis. And eventually I started using an awful lot of cocaine. But in that period of my life, I flunked in school. I wasn't too happy. I wasn't a happy child. My mother sensed that. And my mother sort of spoilt me with love. So I had all this stuff going on. And by the time I was 17, taking exams at school, I just couldn't wait to leave. Couldn't
Yeah.
wait to leave school. My sister and brother, they were excellent students. They excelled and went on to do great stuff at their universities and schools. And but sadly, my brother passed away. But so that was it. And so before I knew it, I'd left school with no qualifications. I went to work for my dad. He used to sell commercial lorries up in London, but there was a lot of shenanigans going on behind the scenes. Every sort of London, villain, big villain, who come out of prison, after spending a long time, like the Freddie Foreman's of the world. I don't know if you know who he is, Eddie
No.
Richardson. Them people. I met them at a very young age. They used
Oh,
to come over to my father's yard and that. So the echelons of the criminality that my father associated in London was extremely high.
so
Extremely.
yeah, that criminal presence was always there for you. So you just kind of, I suppose gravitated to it. And what led you into doing your first crimes? I mean, even if they were little, I mean, was it because I know eventually you started working with your dad, but before that, your dad didn't really want you in the life, right?
No, he wanted me far away from it.
Hmm.
But it was like as if it was like second nature to me. And it wasn't because he showed it to me. We had a nice house. It wasn't ostentatious. It was a good house. We had, sort of the normal thing of a couple of cars in the driveway. We went to good schools. My mother just behaved as a mother would. But behind the scenes, sort of tumbling away was this organised crime syndicate that my father was attached to in a very strong way. And one of his working partners was a man called Joe Parle. And Joe had a friend called Alex Steen. He was a boxing promoter, and he had friends out in New York who were. There was a guy there. He's dead now, called Wazzle. I only tell things about people that are dead or
Right. Don't want to
they,
get in trouble.
yeah,
No
yeah.
one.
So he was in the music industry, Wazzle, and he was good friends with they say that Joe Bogano. Yeah. So my father and Joe went out to New York, and they was well introduced. They met, they met all the five families. Um, Joe Parr was sort of very close to them. My dad was a bit of a wild card. They all liked my dad, but they could see that he was this sort of wild card, and they took to my father. And I can't say that anything happened from that in a criminal activity, but soon after that, things started to take place from Europe into the UK with a cannabis run very early before anyone was really involved. And I know that some Americans was involved. As a young child, I went out to Holland and Italy and met some of these people. And I didn't really know what was going on. I just was with my father. I was quite a young lad then. And that started in the sort of late 70s, early 80s. And my father got him and Joe got arrested. They got found not guilty, but they were targeted by by you would call it the CIA or your FBI or whatever you
Yeah.
call it. Criminal intelligence in the UK.
Mhm.
My dad and his partner were targets, and they was eventually told to sort of stop
Mhm.
um, in a sort of a kind way.
Yeah.
And I was doing my own things. I'd been arrested a couple of times before. I'd been in a terrible car chase with police. I'd wound up in a wheelchair. So my dad started to realise that I was becoming I suppose, what he didn't want me to be. He was so proud of my sister and my brother, and all of a sudden he's got me there, and I've got what he's got, because it's definitely addiction and it's definitely dysfunctional behaviour. You know, it's the high and low, the yin and yang. You're always looking for a fix, but for us it was money. It was,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so he really when he saw that, is that when he started to take you in, once he realized that, you know, you weren't going to do anything else with your life but that at that point in time?
I suppose Adrian, he saw that I'm a 6 foot lad. Yeah, I look like, you know, what you're meant to look like, but I wasn't that person. There was always something inside of me that was crying out to change who I was, not because of criminal activities, because I didn't feel at ease with my who I was. My equilibrium was never balanced. There was always that mixture of opposite. I was either happy or sad. I was either fearless or fearful. There was never no equilibrium for me, and I used a lot of drugs to try and sustain that. But when he started to see that I was doing sort of this stuff after the car chase, I had court appearances. I was in a lot of trouble. There was a lot of help for me. You know, I don't mean help in a bad way, but there was there was influence to help me on the way, and you know, there was a lot of corruption in London. You know, and for years and years. And I'm not saying that corruption was something I entertained, but there was, life was made easy for me on a couple of times, and I don't want to really emphasize on that. And so he could see that his son was becoming something that he was. And when he got arrested with Joe, I think in late 80s, he come to me, and he said, would I like to, you know, entertain his connections, which I did. I was about 98. I was about 30. So he sent me out to Morocco. I went to live in southern Spain. And it was hard for me to go to southern Spain because I'd been there in 1986 when I was wanted by the police. Yeah, after the car chase, I got bail and I absconded. And when I was living down in Spain, I done, I suppose, my apprenticeship with his connections down there, Spain, Morocco, southern Spain. I sort of got involved with sort of, you know, illegal activities. And then one day, my brother, who was my youngest brother, he was a very sweet young man. He was a very compassionate boy. He was a very, he was well balanced. He had that peace that was attractive. He had a sense of humour that wasn't brash. He was just a fun guy, a very intelligent boy. He came down to Spain to be with me while my grandfather was dying, because I was wanted by the police and couldn't go back to the UK. We had words, me and him, very silly words. We got high on coke. He wasn't a coke user. We had words. He went off in the car. I won't go into it too deeply, but sadly, he went underneath a lorry and it killed him stone dead. So, so from the sex abuse to the criminal father to Martin, to my own incarcerations, I was at that place with my father where he said, let's go out to Morocco. So I'd had that turbulent time. So going back to Spain, where Martin had died quite very tragically. His girlfriend then was 6 months pregnant. He never met his son. It's very tragic, very tragic. And then my dad got arrested with Joe. And all this happened so quickly. Yeah. And then he came out, he was on remand, my father. He wasn't sentenced. And he got released, him and his friend, and they was told, you know, behave yourself. Yeah. So, you know, they got acquitted because there wasn't enough evidence. So Joe went off and done his thing, Joe Parle. He got arrested. They fitted Joe up. The police fitted Joe up. He got, they put something in there in the place that was illegal, and he got 14 years. And with my father, they watched him intensely, and I went to work for him. And we was in Morocco, and we started to smuggle drugs at a sort of a high level. But I was very broken by then, with all what had gone on. I was very broken. And I was living, I wasn't conscious. So all that with my brother, and then my dad came out of prison, and he said to, you know, do I want to go to work with him, which I did, and we started to smuggle drugs in a big way. It was organised crime. It was organised crime, and I was hiding in it. It covered up my pain. It covered up my. I became a role play that all I had to do was think and go to work. I used to get high, not when I was working, and that was my escape. But by this time as well in my life, I had three beautiful children. I started to do the things that my father did. I started having affairs, not nice, with other women, bless them. And my wife then gave me three beautiful children, and I just couldn't communicate that. The addiction had grabbed me. The excitement of this life had got me, and my heart closed down. And I wasn't really conscious about the presence of now. I was always either in the past or trying to fix the future. And in that, the hole in me, from the addictions and the death of Martin and all sorts of things like that, it had to be fixed. And I fixed it in a way that I didn't really have to feel. You know, the emotions I closed off, and I became on autopilot. And the addiction kicked in. And before you knew it, I was arrested for 2 accounts of importation of drugs. One they said was thrown in the Bristol Channel, and the second one I was arrested at gunpoint for 4 ton or 5 ton of cannabis. There was 6 officers there. It was organised crime. It was 18 people there unloading it off a boat, and we brought it in on a boat in North Devon, in a place called Bideford, and that's where. And I was sitting on the floor with a gun to my head, and the bizarre thing was it was like a relief. I'm not saying I'm not frightened of guns, but I wasn't perturbed that there was all these armed officers screaming and shouting, pointing guns at me and shouting my name out. It was a relief, and all I could think about was my children. I thought, oh my God. And it was the first sort of clean emotion that I'd had in a long time. And then I was taken to prison. My father got arrested with me, and 16 other guys. I was meant to be a Cat A prisoner, which is a security prisoner. There was guns and all sorts of things involved. But I don't know how, but I wound up in a local B Cat prison, which is less secure. And when I was in that prison, I started to question what my demons were. You know, I wasn't frightened of prison. You know, you can't do the time, don't do the crime. But I was not frightened of Michael, but I wasn't at ease with Michael. And when I was in prison with my dad, I was in a prison cell for 2 years with my father. So that was quite strange.
Yeah, you don't think that usually don't happen, you know. And in your book, I was so surprised. I was like, wow. I mean, you got a lot of time and got to spend it with him. You know, that's lucky that, you know, not lucky to be in prison, but you know, to have him as a cellmate out of all the
Well, it was
people.
blessed in some sort of way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So
But
what was it
otherwise
like
it was
that?
difficult.
What was it like, you know, with him, you know, and what was going through your guys' head when you guys got busted for all that?
Well, when I got busted for it, in a bizarre way, it was a relief. You know, I was tearing about as if I had a twin brother. I was addicted to the money. I was addicted to the moment. I was addicted to living life on the edge because it took me away from my heartache and pain. Yeah. So it was another addiction. And I've done a lot of work, a lot of study and a lot of work on addiction and mental health issues. And for me, it's a malady of the spirit. I believe most, not things like schizophrenic and things like that or bipolars, but they could be healed. But I think a lot of the world suffer with a spiritual malady. I really believe that things like anger and resentments and lust and all those sorts of things, which are very, very active in the world that we live in.
Oh
You
yeah,
know, the world's very fast.
yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think they're all short-lived, those fixes. So when I started to sort of think about me and who I was and what I was, you know, all about, you know, I found that there was parts of me that I didn't like. and I wanted to change. And had I'd left my wife and my children a few years earlier, I'd met an Italian lady in southern Spain, a young lady called Daniela. And they were Italians from Naples, and they had restaurants down in southern Spain, in Marbella. And where I'd lost Martin there early 80s, I then lived there from 89 to about 93. Yeah. And I married this girl, and they were restaurateurs. She was a great girl, very, very Catholic, Italian, but a bit doozy putz, crazy, but a lovely lady. And she was like my Florence Nightingale. It was like God had sent her to me. Yeah, she was there to sort of put my plasters on and lick my wounds, because I was a strange character. And when I got arrested, she was devastated. And she had, where her father had a restaurant in southern Spain, a lot of the villains used to go in there, like the criminals, but a lot of actors and celebrities used to go into their restaurant. So she knew a lot of people. And one of her friends was, well, she wasn't an actress, but we used to have in our Sun newspaper, on the second page were topless girls. And one of them was quite famous, and her name was Samantha Fox. And she knew Daniela, and she'd become a Christian. And Daniela was looking for, that was my wife's name, all looking for all sorts of things where she could help me. And I started to be sort of, I got ants in my pants, and I found it hard to sit still. So I started sort of doing stuff in prisons, like I was creating charities. I'd done some charity work where I got a couple of famous snooker players to come into the prison and play. I got Samantha Fox to come down there with the disabled children. But I was doing it because I didn't want to live in the madness of Michael. I was trying to fix myself, and nothing seemed to work, this gaping hole. And then one day, my father and I, although he was a cannabis smuggler, it was a commodity to him, and he never used to use drugs, never, until we was in prison, and we used cannabis together in the cell, which was quite strange, getting spied with dad.
Was it easily accessed like that, and the guards didn't care? It seemed like in your book, like they didn't really have a major problem with it.
I mean, they don't turn a blind eye to a lot of things, but if you're sort of the category of prisoners that we wasn't causing trouble. We wasn't there for any other reason to get in and get out. So they used to turn a little bit of a blind eye if there was cannabis. You know, they wasn't really. I think they thought it kept everyone quiet. But the other stuff, you know, the sort of class A's and the violence, you know, they wasn't sort of turning their backs. But back in the day, prison was like old school, you know. It wasn't sort of like it is today. And we were sort of, I suppose, known as these sort of London villains who smuggle drugs, and you sort of get left out a little bit. You sort of, they let you do your own thing, not to a level where you just do what you like.
Right.
But cannabis was one of the things, you know.
Yeah.
And then one day I was getting high, and I had a really bad panic attack. And I thought, what's going on? I just could not get at ease with Michael. So I picked the Bible up one day, and I started reading. There's always a Gideon's Bible in every prison cell in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started reading, and in the back there was a concordance about depression and addiction. And I started reading the Bible, but I hid it behind the pillow so no one could see me in my cell. But I had a very staunch grandmother on my mother's side. And she was Catholic through and through. Her bedroom was like a shrine to Jesus. She had so many pictures of Jesus on the wall. I thought he was a relative. He was everywhere, bless him.
Yeah. My grandma's got a bunch too, man. So I know what you mean.
So her prayers, I think, had been answered. And so I'm not religious, but I have a spiritual thing about this. And I believe in Jesus, and I believe in the Holy Spirit. And I'm not an angel. I'm not the best Christian you'll meet, but I'm not who I used to be. It's changed me immensely. Yeah. So at that stage of all what was going on in the prison, reading the Bible, I knew I was searching, and I knew that I couldn't fix myself anymore. And Daniela could see it, her friend Samantha Fox had become a Christian in a very sort of big church in London called Holy Trinity Brompton. And it's the home of Alpha. Alpha's a Christian course. And it's a massive church that, you know, they've planted all around the UK. They have connections around the world. And Samantha Fox went to that church, and she come down to see me. She's done some charity work with some disabled kids, and she started, you know, chatting away about what was going on. And she got in touch with the vicar of HTB, Holy Trinity Brompton, was a guy called Nicky Gumbel, and he's quite he's not a famous man. He's not looking for fame. He's a very humble man, but he's quite a big Christian man around the world. And I don't know how, but I got to talk to him on the phone, and we invited a group down from the church from London. So all that was going on, and I don't think I was doing it really for the purpose of having a faith. I was trying to fix myself on all sorts of things, and but they came down, and something happened. It was my epiphany. It was my moment, of my realization that there was something far greater than me that exists, that propels this world around in space, that gives me the air that I breathe, that allows children to be born. And I had a moment where I was convicted in this chapel. There was about 20 to 30 guys there, and who Samantha Fox had sent down, and something happened, and whereas I couldn't obtain my heart because it was dark, although it was a beautiful heart, I believe, my soul was dirty from the impregnation of the stuff that had happened to me as a child, and my father, and the sins and all that sort of stuff. And something touched me there. And the time I was in the prison cell reading the Bible that time, it was only for about 30 seconds, but I felt this peace that I'd never experienced before. And I'm not making this up. So there was a taste. The addict tasted something, and he liked it. And it was not something that he'd put inside of himself. He hadn't had sex. He hadn't got his cannabis home. He wasn't counting his illegal money. He was reading the Bible, and it touched that stuff that was uncomfortable in me. And this might not make sense to anybody, but it made a lot of sense to me. So when that moment arrived in the church, that feeling I felt when I was in the cell happened again. But this time, the volume and the intensity was far greater. And I was convinced there and then.
Yes, you really had that click moment.
Real. It was a moment, yeah. And that was the birth of Alpha in prisons. That's now around the world. It's in all the it's in a lot of the American prisons. It's a lot of the African prisons, Australia, New Zealand. You know, it went round the world, this course. And about 7 years ago, I was in a church listening to this guy speak from Uganda. And he was on death row in Uganda as a political prisoner for 24 years, I believe.
Damn.
And he'd done this Alpha course that I had started in prison with the help of others. And as I was sitting in this church listening to him, I thought, my God, that's the course that we began. And it saved his life. And I didn't hear a voice, but in my spirit, I felt something clean. I felt like that was the fruit of something good that I'd done. Yeah. And all that for me is about healing. It's about, instead of living in my head, slowly but surely, God allowed my heart to be clean. And he'd done that. I came out of prison and I relapsed for a year on drugs. I had another affair as a Christian. Sadly, I won't say it's an affair. I started seeing a woman that I shouldn't have seen, and I fell from grace, and then I started to get back on my feet again. I had sort of financial blessings from I wouldn't say they were blessings, but from my activities from before. So I built this life. I was a part owner of a music group called Kasabian. I had a radio station. I had the flower business, I had property, and I'd invested, other people's money into these projects. So I was living this life of coming out of prison, Christian, building these businesses, but there was still something in me that was trying to take me back to destruction. And then God gave me 9 grandchildren from 3 of my children. That was part of the release of my dark heart. But when my grandchildren came along, I'd lost everything. I went from having everything I thought to having nothing, and I mean nothing, where I couldn't even afford a bus ride. So I went from this high level of life, but I honestly believe it was another part of my healing. It was another mark. And there's nothing wrong with having loads of money and driving a nice car. I'm not against any of that. But mine was obtained in a bizarre way, and I believe it got taken from me for the purpose of good. Because in that time when I'd lost everything, I really found Michael. It was like all these materialistic stuff that I had was stopping my healing as well. It was the mask started to come on, the businessman doing well, but I was still broken inside. And like when I lost everything, and my God gave me 9 beautiful grandchildren, it helped my recovery, and I started to get well mentally. And then I was asked if I wanted to write my story, my autobiography with Harper and Collins, Sins of Fathers, and which I'd done that 2 or 3 years ago. And there was other things I've missed out. I divorced Daniela, the Italian lady. I'm best friends with her today. I'm best friends with the mother of my children, Tracy. I have 4 daughters today and 9 grandchildren, and it's beautiful. It's really beautiful. So when I got asked to write the book, I was still in a lot of debt. I lost my homes, I lost everything, but I lost my mental health and regained a good mind from it. Yeah, it made me get close to God.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to go through things like that, horrible, tragic things in order to really find and, change that mindset, find your peace and really just, want to be something different, something better, a better version of you.
Amen. Amen. And I found out that we didn't choose to be what we was like, but we had an opportunity to choose to change.
Yeah, that's true.
So that was the opportunity I took. And so in the situation with the book, yeah, and sadly for us, as we went to release it, COVID came. So
yeah.
So we had to we couldn't do what we was meant to do with it, with the promotions. So we had to have a social media presence. So we done okay.
Yeah.
We done okay for that. And then I suppose from that point, my life today is we have a charity where we work with people coming out of prisons. I mentor people today. One guy's just finished 34 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a long time to do.
That is.
I worked with another young man, a Polish young man, who was in the Russian and Polish jails. He was a gang leader. He gave his life to the Lord, and I mentor him. We're writing another book. But for me, the most incredible thing for me, that through my journey of having everything and losing everything, that thing of finding myself, which was what's become so sort of dramatic, in being absolutely stripped naked. My car was a Range Rover, and I couldn't afford a bus pass. Yeah. But in that period of time prior to the book, God started to show me little signs. Like, one of the signs that he showed me was I was standing outside my house in Chelsea, which was a lovely house. Eventually, I got made homeless. And I was standing outside my house at that homeless part, although I wasn't on the streets, but I'd lost everything. And I looked at my house. I had no money in my pocket. And I thought, like, what's happened? And before I could ask myself the question, I knew that if you're going to walk the walk, if you're going to talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. Yeah. And the power of God in my life to take everything away from me. And I accepted it because I knew that for my complete recovery, things had to go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they can't come back. But when I was standing outside my house, up the road from my house, the underground, the tube, the underground is an underground station called South Kensington.
Okay.
Subway, call it.
Oh,
Subway.
okay. Yeah.
And I had to get on a train. And I was standing outside my house. I went to the train station and I had no money. So I thought, what am I going to do? And I said a prayer, help me. Please help me. I needed £4.80 to get on the train. I went down into the subway and there was the ticket collector. And we have a thing called an Oyster card where you put your money in and charge your card up to get on the train.
Mm-hmm.
So the Oyster cards was at the back of the station. And I said, look, help me get home, please. And I heard this noise by the Oyster card machine. And I walked over to that machine and £5 fell out. I don't know how.
Wow.
And I
Damn.
felt it's not what you want, it's what you need.
Yeah.
And they were, and then moments came along quite a number of times. Whereas I had someone sort of there was a confrontation I was in as a Christian over this debt I got myself involved with and losing everything. And a man tried to attack me in a violent way. And whether he was right or wrong, it doesn't matter. We're friends today. He's a lovely fella. And I know that I was protected there. I know there was things along my journey. My prayer was, God, give me my money back. Yeah. Because I got in debt with the wrong people as well. It got quite uncomfortable. Yeah.
Didn't when you lost? I was
Sorry?
gonna say when you lost all the money, wasn't there a scam that went down, or what led
Yeah.
up to you losing it all?
Yeah, there was a lot of things that went down. There was a scam went down where someone stole a lot of money from us. There was businesses there was a business in New York. There was businesses everywhere. But whatever the situation was, I believe it was my destiny. Yeah. But trying to manage it, I employed staff. I had businesses where there was staff working there, a flower business. I had a Christmas tree business, this radio station. I had all this stuff going on. And so it was when I lost everything, it was, I went back to my old life and borrowed money. Yeah. Which was not my old life. I didn't take criminal money, but I went to the wrong people to loan money, thinking I'd get out of it. They trusted me. That caused a headache, but it's all getting sorted. It's all sorting itself out. And they were friends of mine as well. And God used all these things to extract me from this life of destruction because He had a purpose for me. So I went through all this heartache and this pain of seeing God's glory and His miracle in my life. And when my grandchildren started to be born, because I had no money, I had to do the things that normal people do, like go to a park, push kids on the swings. So I formulated a relationship with all of these grandchildren. Yeah, sorry, there's 8, not 9. 3, yeah, 9, 8, 3. And I formulated with a relationship with these 8 kids, and God used them to the catalyst for my heart. All that bony crap that I picked up and that deceit and that darkness, He used the innocence of my grandchildren to show me love. And I responded. I responded at a tender age of about 50. I responded to love because I was searching for love all my life.
Yeah, and you
I
got it
was
through them.
searching for that healing.
Yeah.
And whatever God, he used a donkey in the Bible. So He'll use anything, whether you want to call it God or love or alternatives. For me, it's the cross. And I
Yeah.
think Jesus was I'll tell you what, he was a tough boy, Jesus. On the cross, he was next to a criminal. You know, there was no, if you look at the Bible, it's quite a very violent book. And, you know, they don't hide the darkness of one's life, but they give hope. And whatever people want to believe, they can believe in themselves, money, sex, drugs, God, whatever they want to believe in. But for me, the relationship that I had through Jesus with God, and I'm not like out on the street corners, hallelujah. That's it. That's nothing wrong with that. People do what they want to do. But I give away what I believe my healing of love has given to me. Yeah. So that's working with people like me. Yeah. And we're tricky customers, you know, us prisoners, but we're good guys as well, you know, and we all deserve a chance. So I love going into prisons and talking and chatting. And so God used the mess for the message. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean that really makes sense. And it's nice that you're able to reach out to, like, in the criminal element because, say like me, I've never had that kind of past. It's like if I try to preach to them and tell them that this is gonna go through their head, but you say it, you're on, you can relate to them on a level, you know what I mean?
Do you have a faith, Adrian?
Well, right now, I mean, I go to Christian church with my girlfriend and stuff, but just starting to get into it and
Yeah, it's
you
cool.
know,
It's cool. It's
yeah, yeah.
cool.
So I'm trying, you know what I mean? But I've always believed in, God and a higher power, but I just gotta tap into, my religion and stuff. But yeah, I definitely believe there's a
You in
higher power.
recovery?
I've never been an addict or anything like that or but you know,
No,
I have a, oh,
the
go
word
ahead.
higher power. That's a term that's used in in sort of recovery.
Oh, okay.
But the journey of life. How old are you? Do you mind me asking?
22.
Oh, bless you. Oh, what a wow! Bless you. Oh, wonderful. Oh, what a lovely age. I pray you have a beautiful life, Adrian. With your, I really
Oh,
do.
thank you. Thank
You're a
you.
nice man. You're a nice man. I can sense that. So in all of that, you know, it was. It took me to my knees to really break because we don't like to surrender. We think it's weak, and I had to surrender because my malady of spirit wanted to mess with my brain, and I couldn't take it no more. So I accepted the loss of everything for the purpose of good. I accepted that God had given me these lovely grandchildren so I could love them. Yeah. And in that, my healing came. Bizarrely, my healing came. And I can testify today to being a changed man. I still have to work hard on who I am and what I do. Yeah. And then you start to realize that what life is all about is learning to love ourselves so we can love other people, staying in the truth. But there's so much illness out there, Adrian. I see it all the time. There's so many people who are unwell, and it breaks my heart because they don't have the knowledge of it. They
Yeah,
just continue in their plight in life, and I see it a lot in my life, especially in the prisons. I've seen it in my own family. You know, there's suicide in my family. There was all sorts of stuff going on, same-sex relationships, and each to their own. There's no judgment from me. Violence. So I started to see in my dad's family that sins of father, it didn't only permutate over me, but it permutated over his three sisters' children as well. There was chaos everywhere, suicide, prison sentences. My mother's family, no. My mother's family, and it doesn't mean to say they're better people than my dad's family, but they were given the gift of peace. So that we had both those elements in the family life. And I started to realize as you get older, no judgment. Because we
yeah,
don't know what people are going through.
right.
We
You
really don't.
don't. No,
No.
and once you come to, terms with that, you can really, you can accept people for who they are, but you need to try, if they're really going down the wrong path, you can continue to, sprinkle it on them, like, hey man, you can do this, or there's other stuff out there, you know what I mean? But if you just try to constantly pound them and pound them, I mean, I don't think they want to listen. But like I said with you, I mean, it's different because you went through that criminal element, when you went through that life. So you can definitely, it's easier for you to preach to someone about it,
Yeah.
than for me.
Well, you're a young man, and I pray whatever you've got to do, you do. But what I really do believe, yeah, is there's a spiritual law, Adrian, yeah, and I believe it's the one that, whether we have a faith or not, works constantly in people's lives, and I think it's we reap what we sow. Yeah. Now, if we sow out there in the wrong way, yeah, we receive it back. But the price that we pay, I really believe that the price that we pay is, and we don't realise this, is we dirty our souls. And the only way you can get your soul cleansed is by opening up to something which is more powerful than I am. And there's a purpose and a timing for everything in our lives. And I don't know why I was called to this situation. On a personal note, it was for my own healing. Yeah, because I bear witness to healing, and that's true. Yeah, even with my present health condition, I have no qualms that my faith will see me through it. Yeah, no qualms whatsoever. And God rebuilds every day. Yeah, and it's not about the church, because churches are great, communities are good. It's about a relationship. Yeah. And the most important relationship that we need to have is with ourselves, because I have to wake up with Michael every morning. Yeah. So to get on with me was what my quest was. And the more I know about faith, the less I seem to know. There's always something for me to learn. So he will use anything he possibly can to set us free from the perils of addiction, and things that harm ourselves and harm other people. And it's not portrayed like that, the church. All right, here we go, hallelujah, blah, blah, blah. But the bottom line is, churches are like hospitals. We all deserve a break. We all deserve to be set free. We all deserve to be able to just be okay in life, because it goes that quick. Yeah. And I think my responsibility is, I want to see the promised land, Moses Nether, yeah. But I want to hand this baton on to my children and my children's children. That the destiny that had changed dramatically from my grandfather Charlie to Brian, my dad, to me. The pain that I've been through, I pray the pain that I've been through is the gain for my children and my grandchildren. That they will only know what's right. Yeah. They won't have to go through the trial and tribulations that I went through. And I haven't got the violin out, but I've been through it. Yeah. But when you go through all this stuff, it's bizarre, because you start to realize that there is something else.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, man. And like you said, I mean, you just really want, of course, for your children and your grandchildren to, not have to go through the hardships you go through. So I think, there's a lot of truth into that. And I think, as long as you kind of guide them and tell them, hey, these are the mistakes I made. You don't want to go down this path. I'm telling you, you do your job and you tell them. And I think for the most part, a lot of people do, listen to their parents, grandparents. But some, like you had to go through what you went through, and now look who you are today. I mean, you really changed around. You know what I mean?
Do you know what it is as well? You're absolutely right. But I think what it is as well, it's okay to show them, yeah. But when we start to break sort of addictions that we've been handed down from the family trait, let's just say, without saying because the Bible calls it the sins of the forefathers. When we begin to break those behaviors, I don't know how it works, but it breaks on my children and my grandchildren. Whatever my grandfather had and my dad had, I inherited it. Without a doubt, I did. They didn't show me. It was definitely in the spirit or my makeup.
Mm-hmm.
And as I change this, I believe spiritually, and it might sound odd to anybody, but I believe spiritually something breaks. It's like a curse is lifted. Yeah. we open up the way for the generations that are coming. And if that's my quest on this earth, is to make sure that my children and my grandchildren go through a life without this hindrance of this madness of violence, criminal activities, prisons. Don't get me wrong, I love prisons and prisoners, I really do. But I don't want my children, well, my girls won't see it, but I don't want my grandchildren. I've got 5 grandsons, and I don't want them to have this germ of dysfunction, let's call it like that. If my time on this earth, and I've had some fun, trust me, I've had some fun.
Yeah, but like you said, it's got to end somewhere, and you ended it with what you said. You're 50 years old. You put an end to it. So it had to start somewhere. So
yeah,
so you're setting the example. And doing shows and your books and helping people out within the prisons and stuff. That's definitely helping them. Because when you might, I'm sure you've already have impacted people and helped them change their lives and stuff already.
Yeah.
Whether you heard it from them or not. I mean, you're putting this out there constantly, and videos and stuff in your book will always be out there even when after you're gone. You know what I mean?
Bless you. Bless you. You know what? I've been interviewed quite a lot and done stuff. We have to be careful of our ego, yeah. But in a very humble way, you've got a really nice presence about you. I know I said early in the show, but you really have, and I think that's important. Let me ask you a question. What is your objective? Where would you want to take this podcast that you've got? Where would you like it to go? What's your destiny?
Well, I would like to, I kind of like what you do. You try to help people out that have had a past, a rough past and stuff. So I want to be able to, interview guys like you and, really, put out there that there's more to life than just, the criminal element. There's so much better out there, but I want to be able to, help people out. I like that. And, I'd like to just keep building my show and, be able to take it to a bigger level. I mean, that's where I want to go with it. I just really want to help people,
Okay. On that note, some advice from an old timer. Yeah.
Okay.
You have to be patient.
Yep.
And you have to be really honest with yourself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think by meeting you that it's a gift. You have an ability to relax people. I don't know how you've got what it's your character, your nature, and you interview. And I know I rabbit. I do talk a lot because I like to get it out there.
Yeah.
But I just find that for a young man, maybe God's give you wisdom and peace, but develop that, because rather than this sort of podcast, develop what you've got. And I'm not knocking podcasts, I think they're great, but these criminal podcasts sometimes can repeat themselves, and there's some great podcasters out there, don't get me wrong. There's a number in the UK: Paul Stansby, James English, Sean Atterwood, Steve Wright. There's a number of Billy Moore. There's some great people who do this stuff here, yeah. But I do think if you can bring a different sort of genre to it, yeah, rather than people getting excited because there's a criminal on there.
Yeah, right. You're right.
They do that.
Yeah.
So my story's different.
Yeah,
I could spoke about crime for an hour on here, and you'd have been getting a million. What? But this is my message of redemption and faith.
Yeah, no, I like it, man. You have a really good story, and I'm glad you're able to come on and really just share what you've been through and your experiences, and how you really changed it around. Because not there's not a whole lot of people that get that opportunity. If they get killed at a young age, and they're gone. They don't get that opportunity to make it. So you got to stop it at some point before it gets too far. You know what I mean? And you're one of the cases that did.
Yeah. Thank you. But you know what I just said to you about yourself, develop that. And if you want me to introduce you to a couple of people who will come on your show,
yeah,
I can
Absolutely.
also do that.
Yeah.
I can get you some good interviews if you want them.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
with their
yeah. I'd be
stories.
down with that. Of
Okay,
course. I mean,
not
you
this
got.
side of Christmas. After,
Yeah, yeah.
but we're staying. We're yeah. There's something cool about you, son.
Though I appreciate that. I mean,
Something
I,
cool
I
about
I just really try to give the person that interview a platform to let them talk because it's their story. I mean, it's not about me. It's about what they've been through. You know what I mean? And I throw in my topics and stuff in there, but it's really about you. You're the person being interviewed.
Well, I hope this works. I hope it's a good interview.
Yeah, I liked it, man. And for everybody that wants to check out Michael's book, I'll put a link in the description. He's got a really good redemption story. And in his book, he goes into a lot more detail about crimes and everything he did while he was growing up. So, if you really want to hear more about him and his roads, oh, there it is, right there, right there. It's also, you can get it as an audio book too. So if you don't want to read it, I mean, you can listen to it too. So
We're
there's all
doing other
kinds of different
stuff as
things.
well. We're doing other stuff. I've just had to put everything down for a couple of months while I went
Yeah.
into a stage of recovery. But Adrian, I hope you keep in touch with me.
Oh,
Yeah.
of course, I
If
got
we
you.
can do anything else in the near future, if we want to promote anything, either of us,
Yeah.
let mainly, I like you.
No, thank you.
I find you. I hope you develop this show.
Yeah, well, thank you, and I hope you keep. I know you will. I know you'll keep helping people out. Well, what'd you think of this interview with Michael? He's got a really interesting story, a really good redemption story, that is. Please comment any key takeaways that you got from this show. Please share it with someone that you think will enjoy it. Also, please don't forget to hit subscribe to my channel. I'll put the link to Michael's book in the video description. Also, if you want to support me and my brand, I got t-shirts, hoodies, beanies, and sweats. I'll put my link to my clothing brand in the video description. One more thing that I'll bring up is the documentary series that I've been working on. It's about the rise and fall of the American Mafia. There's 11 episodes altogether. Each episode is about a different crime family. Thank you again for watching. Now check out this trailer I made for it. This life is very twisted. You never know when it's your time to go. One day you're putting in work with someone, and the next day they're taking you out.
In our days, it was very quiet. Nobody ever talked about this. Nobody glamorized it. It was all like hush hush.
Not a glamorous life. And again, it's not what you see in Goodfellas. It's not what you see in Casino. Some days you were dead broke. Some days you had $2,000 in your pocket. It wasn't every day. You don't know anything else. You don't know what it is to go wake up 6 o'clock and go to work. Work? What the fuck is that? I wasn't going to work.
Even bosses get murdered in this life.
There was younger guys underneath him, and he wasn't doing the right thing, I guess. He was coming out of the card game, and unfortunately, a lone gunman came up and shot him 5 times.
People who knew me would tell you I like to use the bat a lot. If I had to shoot you, I'd shoot you too. I've done that.
This life requires many mixed personalities. You have to wear many hats in this life to try and survive.
You become 4 or 5 different people all at once. And you got to go home and be a dad and a husband. You got to go to work and do your job. You got to be out in the street and be a gangster.
Bonanno family is called Bonanno family because of my grandfather, Joe Bonanno.
That life there is gone. Today you have to be legitimate today.
Man, but you got to be an idiot to want to be a hooligan today. Jail time's now like 100 years for doing nothing.
You'll be dead, in prison for life, or in the witness protection program.
I don't know anybody. Now, when the Mafia turned their back on me, I know everybody.
There was the big flip of the Gambino underboss, Sammy the Bull Gravano.
Here he is, signing autographs in a restaurant on Mulberry Street. And was supposed to be a secret organization.
He was a very, very, very violent guy. No question about it.
Albert Anastasia, he was a Brooklyn guy. He was probably the biggest killer in the history of the mob.
Michael Francis, his father, Sonny, was a really tough guy. But he really raised his son right.
If you want to see a gangster, that's Sonny Francis. And John Sr. don't compliment anybody.
This is a documentary series about the American Mafia. It includes 11 different crime families. Each episode is about a different one. The crime families include the Gambino, Genovese, Bonanno, Colombo, Lucchese, the Gallo Crew, Chicago Outfit, the Philadelphia Mafia, the Patriarca, the Trafficante crime family, and the Jewish Mafia. Please subscribe to my channel to watch each episode as they come out.